and welcome to my final exam video submission. I apologize for the purple glasses glare, but my glasses are essential because I have horrible eyesight. So, let's begin this exam. So, the first question is asking about the evolution of equality in America. If you do not mind, please allow me to read from my script I wrote. Equality is something that can always be improved upon, and America is a prime example of that. The country was founded upon the idea of seeking equality. And I say seeking equality because I believe that a country can always improve and grow, but I also say this because when the founding fathers were founding America and building this philosophy did not include all. Specifically, it did not include the rights of women, it did not include the rights of African American people who were legally considered property due to the Three-Fifths Compromise. So, yeah, it is a very, very dark and very brutal history, but I think knowing that history is so essential. After all, those who fail to learn from history are bound to repeat it. So what I'm trying to say here is while America has not always been perfect, frankly, it's been far from perfect, especially in terms of ensuring equality for all. I am proud to say that as an American, I have done my best to fight that everyone gains true equality. And I do believe that can be achieved. And I know it can be achieved because not only am I living in a reality where people are fighting for equality, where they are fighting to protect the people of America, but also history shows us that they have been able to improve America in terms of equality. You ready? Let me explain. We hold these truths to be self evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, pause. So, what I just read is from the Declaration of Independence. And I want you to take note of specific wording that says all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their creator, which means that even if one is not religious, it is supposed to hold this weight that there is a power above the people, and that power is securing that right. Like that power has given a stamp of approval. Of course, I do argue that somebody shouldn't do the right thing just because a deity says you should do the right thing. You should just do the right thing because it's the right thing. However, that is a totally different question. Like, that is a totally different topic. And I made sure to write a script so I would not go off on tangents this time. But anyway, I really do want to point out, like I said before, the phrasing all men and that they are all endowed with these certain unalienable rights that are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I don't know, I find it to be very hypocritical because it says all men, but in reality, the example wasn't all men, it was some men. And what were those men? White men. That's it. But the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, it says all men. However, in practice, it only applied to some. And I think that is disgusting because, again, if America was built on this philosophy that all human beings are, they are not to be denied life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, then why has our government and legal system done everything in their power to make it so that isn't reality? Which again, I feel like that shows that
it's a very complicated history with equality in America. And it's this back and forth of, yes, so much stuff has been done to ensure equality, but at the same time, so much has been done to ensure inequality. You get what I mean? However, progress has been made even back then because the Declaration was declared in 1776. However, in 1779, the Bill of Rights, which are the first 10 amendments to, well, the Constitution, were ratified. So just look at that jump. From 1776 to 1779, the people of America were like, okay, we have a really good foundation. However, we need to improve upon that foundation. We need to have security and reinforcements. Now, what were those reinforcements? I'm so glad you asked, because I have it written down right here. One of these reinforcements that was secured with the Bill of Rights ensured freedom of religion. And as a Muslim, that is something that is very near and dear to my heart. Allow me to read the exact wording. Beginning quote, prohibiting the free exercise of religion, end quote, Bill of Rights. And what it means by prohibiting the free exercise of religion is that the government, specifically Congress, shall not make any rulings that will stop people from being able to practice, which unfortunately means that while legally you are protected, you are not emotionally safe from bigotry. I I don't like to bring up sad topics, but I feel like this is relevant. The first time I was ever called a terrorist, I was 5 years old. When I was 9 years old, my fifth grade history teacher said that me and the two other Muslim girls, who she knew were Muslim girls, mind you, she said that all of us were terrorists and that we were not true Americans, regardless of the fact that all three of us were not only born in the United States, making us naturalized citizens by the very definition, which was, I digress. I digress. You see, when I think about bigotry, then I get upset and then I get off topic. And it's just what I'm saying is this is huge progress because it is a legally protected right. And I appreciate that. I think that is incredible. However, just because it's legally protected doesn't mean that it is emotionally protected. And the thing is, you can't legislate emotions. Because if we allowed that door to open, then it would be this whole thing of who gets to decide what you think and feel. So yeah. However, we're going to try to keep the vibes somewhat good because progress is being made, especially historically it's being made. So continuing on the path of like moving forward established by the Bill of Rights, we jump to the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. These were the amendments that made slavery illegal. That is the 13th. The 14th established birthright citizenship, which was what I just briefly mentioned. So, legally, what that is ensuring is it is saying who is an American citizen. And then when you are an American citizen, it basically, sorry, it is basically saying that as an American citizen, it defines what an American citizen is. And thanks to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, we know what are your legally protected rights as an American citizen. So that is what those two did. But what I think was one of the most important ones is the 15th Amendment. Allow me to directly read the wording. Beginning quote, the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude, end quote. So I want you to pay very specific attention to the words that we are seeing because it is establishing that, the right to vote shall not be denied based off of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. That means if you were previously a slave, which is one of the most disgusting things in the world. Human beings are not property. Human beings are human beings. But I digress. So this was ensured by the 15th Amendment. And again, this is tremendous progress, especially to be made in such a short time, because you have to remember, America isn't that old of a country. Even by modern standards today, 250 years, which is what America is officially turning this year, is really not that old in comparison to countries like China, who have been around for thousands of years. But once again, I digress. So again, progress is being made, but it can always be improved, because this is only guaranteeing the right to vote for specifically African American men, which is again tremendous. However, women, regardless of your color or complexion, they too deserve to have their voices heard, and that right was still being denied to them at this time. However, again, progress is still moving forward. It might be taking a long time, but it is moving forward. And a quote that I want to read that I think really illustrates my point comes from Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham. So give me 1 minute to please pull that up, because once again, very bad eyesight. I gotta like zoom in all the way. 1 second. Alrighty, I got it pulled up. You ready? Okay, here we go. Beginning quote. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Never again can we afford to live with the narrow, provisional, outside agitator idea. 1 minute, my laptop fell. Sorry, I am not a professional vlogger. I don't think I would pass professional vlogging. But end quote. Basically, what Dr. King said truly defines my stance and belief for really just moving through life. Dare I say, it is the foundation of that, and that is the suffering of all. Sorry, the suffering of all is the suffering of one, and the suffering of one is the suffering of all. And what I mean by that is all suffering is connected, and that when one person is being oppressed, then all are being oppressed. Because when the door to oppress one person is open, that is a very slippery slope that will lead to the oppression of all. And then as a Muslim, we live by the philosophy that if you kill one person, it is as if you killed all of humanity. But if you save one person, it is as if you saved all of humanity. And I think that reflects it in the sense that human life is valuable. It cannot be quantified by worth. Like, there is no number you can give that a person's life is worth. And that is why it is so important to acknowledge the history of, yeah, there were horrific things that occurred. But even amidst these horrors, progress was being. Hello! Let's answer part 2 of the final, which is analyzing a Federalist paper. And as I stated in a previous video essay, I absolutely adore Hamilton. So the Federalist paper that I did choose to do is a Hamilton reference. Basically, there's a line in the song talking about like how they divided up the number of who wrote the Federalist Papers. And there's this very famous part of it where Aaron Burr yells, "And Hamilton wrote the other 51. So I chose to analyze Federalist Paper 51. Though I would like to note that we do not know officially who wrote it. Speculation is either Alexander Hamilton or James Madison. And then as another Hamilton reference, you can't see it, but in the musical Hamilton, Hamilton is referred to as A. Ham. So when I was writing when I was basically abbreviating who wrote it, I did do A. Ham or J. Mad for James Madison. Also, This Federalist paper was written and published in 1788, which was 1 year before the Bill of Rights, meaning those first 10 amendments was ratified. But anyway, on to Federalist Paper 51. So this Federalist paper is basically saying that we need a solution. We need a safety net for if anything were to happen, like if certain officials would be corrupted, we need something to make sure that they are not going to abuse our newly established democracy, like how King George was able to abuse the colonies. And the solution? Checks and balances. Specifically, the checks and balances that the three branches of government have with one another. Like how the legislative has a check and balance, the executive department has a balance, and that the judicial branch has a check and balance. For example, one of that is the president's ability to veto. That is, of course, one of his checks and balances. So yeah, that they are very, very important is what I mean. But how did we come to this conclusion? Allow me to read a quote. Beginning quote. Ambition must be made to counter ambition. The interest of the man must be connected with the constitutional rights of men. End quote. What does this mean? Well, it's like what I stated earlier, that we need a solution. We need a safety net in case the wrong people get into power. And really, the reason why they were thinking this is because they had just witnessed absolute corruption. You see, power often corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. King George, he was the absolute dictator, the absolute monarch. He had absolute power, and oftentimes those who have absolute power are very cruel, and they become drunk in that power. If you are a fantasy fan, a really good fictional example of a king who was crazy, there was no checks and balances, would be King Joffrey from Game of Thrones. This was a man who, he was crazy. He was executing people right and left. He was like cutting people's tongues off, like crazy man. But what I'm trying to say is that was really just the connecting point of why we needed these Federalist Papers. And specifically what this Federalist paper was trying to convey is that, look, it's always good to be prepared for a worst case scenario. Like, we don't want a situation to happen where we need to be using these checks and balances, but if a situation were to arise, it's really good we have it. I describe it as a safety net. For example, let's say a very skilled acrobat is, they're flipping, they're using the trapeze, and they don't fall because, again, they're a very skilled acrobat. They are trained. However, mistakes happen, mishaps happen, and if they were to fall, they would land on the safety net. And that is really what the point of these checks and balances, because again, it's a safety net. So in summary, Federalist paper number 51, the goal of it was to again just say we need a safety net. We need checks and balances. We need to take precautions because we have seen absolute power play out, and we are not going to have this in our new democracy. Once again, it was either written by Alexander Hamilton or James Madison, because they did choose to be anonymous with certain Federalist papers, and then other Federalist papers, they did explicitly say who wrote it. Also, and I learned this from Hamilton, there was a third author of the Federalist Papers. His name was John Jay. So there was John Jay, Alexander Hamilton, and James Madison. Those are the confirmed people we know. But again, there could have been more. We don't know. So yes, the goal of this Federalist paper was to say, hey, we need a backup plan. It was published in 1788. And I think it is extremely important because, safety nets are vital. And I know that the people agreed they were vital because we have checks and balances. So yes, that is the answer for number 2.
Hello. So for my third question, I will be choosing to respond to the second prompt. And the second prompt is, historian Manisha Sinha argued that the United States was transformed into a second American republic after the Civil War. Do you agree with this argument? Did the United States fundamentally change to become a new type of government at the end of the Civil War? So, based off of that question, and really just the first things that do come to my head, I say yes, but there is a but yes, but also kind of no. So I say kind of no because while there were improvements made, the actual structure of our government didn't change. We are still a representative democracy, and we are still a democracy in the sense that people can vote, and then you can vote for your representatives, and those representatives will represent you and your needs, that then you can directly vote, like when you are directly voting for president or things of that nature. So that itself did not change. It's not like America moved from being this democracy to being an oligarchy. So that didn't change, and that really is the butt of all of this. However, immense progress was made that does feel like, in the way the United States did become something new. And you're probably wondering, Amira, what do you mean by that? What I mean by that is the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. So, please excuse me for looking down. I do not want to accidentally misquote anything. But the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were vital because it undid wrongs that never should have existed in the first place, meaning that the 13th Amendment made slavery illegal, the 14th Amendment defined citizenship and created birthright citizenship. This was especially vital for making it so that, this again is very sad, but anyway, children who were slaves and who were born in the United States, that they are recognized automatically as an American citizen, and that is why people often refer to it as birthright citizenship, even though the amendment itself guarantees and defines citizenship for those who are naturalized and those who are born in the United States. For example, my father immigrated to America, I want to say in maybe early 1993, and he is a naturalized citizen. He immigrated, he passed all of his stuff, and he was naturalized. So the 14th Amendment does apply to him. It just, sorry, I don't know. See, I go on tangents, but I feel like the tangents are good because they're still vital to what I'm talking about. But anyway, and the 15th Amendment gave African Americans the right to vote. Specifically, though, it only gave African American men the right to vote, which again is still huge and tremendous progress. But at the same time, all people deserve to vote, and it doesn't matter what chromosomes you have or what gender you identify with. You know what I mean? For example, allow me to read the exact wording from the 15th Amendment. Beginning quote: "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude," end quote. So, not only did the 13th Amendment end slavery, but the 15th Amendment made it very clear that somebody's ability to vote would not be denied based on the fact that they were a former slave. Because once again, slavery should have never existed. It is disgusting. It is inhumane, and it is one of the darkest stains in American history.
And sadly, there are many dark stains in American history. However, again, the 15th Amendment was tremendous. However, and I know I keep saying however, the exact wording was beginning, quote, on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude, end quote. So again, nowhere does it mention gender. Nowhere does it say the right for a woman to vote who is, based off upon race or color. And again, it is upsetting. But at the same time, this is something that should be celebrated within this period. And that is why I feel like it is very paradoxical to be someone who studies American history, because there are things that should be celebrated and that are so huge. But then there are other things where you're like, oh no, that is really not great. Or, okay, it's great that you did this one thing, but you didn't address this other issue. And sadly, I also need to mention that just because African American people were legally allowed to vote, it doesn't mean they were actually able to vote. For example, there were all of these crazy and more inhumane laws that were passed, such as literary test, which I don't know if you've ever seen one, but when I was in high school, my history teacher allowed us to view one. I want to say I was 15, and I also bring up that English is the only language that I am fluent in. It is my first language. I believe I am a very capable reader. I could not understand this literary test at all. And that's the point. It's to make it so people aren't able to vote, specifically African American men. And then you have grandfather clauses, which, try to establish that you can't vote based off of these, time limitations, and the reason why I am not explaining further is because grandfather clauses are migraine-inducing. I could barely figure them out when I was dealing with an HOA. So, yes, and I'm not trying to make light of it. I'm simply trying to provide some levity because this is a very, very dark subject that we are debating. Well, not debating, discussing. Again, I cannot be a professional vlogger. I'm messing up every minute and I'm still going. Mostly because I know if I stopped every time I made a mistake, I would never get this done. And yeah, okay, so in conclusion, because I have a very big fear that I talk in circles. So in conclusion, it was in a way a new America because it made tremendous and huge progress. It was a new beginning for many people, including specifically African American people, but at the same time, it wasn't perfect. Like, you had the KKK running around, and the police did nothing about that. And the police still choose to do nothing about that because there have been multiple lynchings where African American men and women have been found hanging on trees outside of college campuses, and the police have ruled there is no foul play, even though a majority of these people had both their arms and legs broken before they died. So how can someone hang themselves if their arms and legs were broken before they died? So that's why I'm saying is, it feels horrible because progress has been made, but at the same time, it goes so slow, or there are all these horrible setbacks. And again, you can't police a person's bigotry, but you can police them if they break the law. And assaulting and murdering a person is breaking the law. But what are you supposed to do when the people who are supposed to be enforcing these laws and protecting the citizens side with bigotry? So I do agree with prompt 2. However, and again, there's always a however, There are so many things wrong with it, and that is just really devastating. Hi! Alright, so that is it. It is the end. Yeah. Sorry, I did not write a script for the end part. I was like, I'm gonna improv it, so I am improving it. But yeah, this is the end of my final. I wanted to say thank you for the semester. I also apologize for the late hour that I am submitting this. I once again ran into some technology issues where not only did the original I made, somehow the file got corrupted and it deleted itself, but then my Wi-Fi was like, you know what would be so funny? What if I crash? So, a lot of stuff happened. Situation is resolved. So yeah, and thank you for this semester. I had so much fun learning. All right, bye. Have a good night. Have a good summer. Happy August, and see you later.